Hey, you already know what it is. It's your boy A&R for the Streets. Welcome to the A&R for the Streets podcast. We got a special guest in the building. You feel me? I've been watching this guy for over 10 years. You feel me? I've been watching him doing his thing, making his dreams happen. You feel me? It's crazy when you get to see somebody make their dream. They come up with a concept, they come up with an idea. Even though nobody rock with the idea, they just stick to it. You know what? I'm gonna make it happen. Even though nobody believe in this remix thing, I don't know what the hell it is, but I'm gonna make it happen. The same way I feel about this up next thing, you know? I felt first time I started, nobody know what the hell it is. But I kept to it, you know what I mean? I kept doing my thing. Right now we got Gavin Sheppard in the building right now, a creative mastermind that's been doing this thing in the city for a long time. And I appreciate what he's done for creatives in the city and what he's been able to kind of like inspire a lot of people in the city to keep doing their thing, can keep being motivated and chase their dreams. So Gavin, you got the stage. You feel me? Let the people know about yourself, how you came up in the game. You feel me? Who inspired you? Everything. Let them know.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely happy to join the conversation because all those things that you were saying about me could kind of be echoed back towards you at the same time. So I see you like what you've been doing is the reason why I wanted to join the conversation because like again, becoming a platform for creatives, creating opportunity for people, putting people in front of an audience, in front of like deserving folks that are talented, you know putting them front and center and celebrating folks, and that's kind of what it's always been about for me. Like I in terms of where my start is, I guess in terms of this music shit, like I started selling mixtapes when I was like 14, back when like CDs and tapes were actually a thing.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I've been doing this for a minute, so I earned these white hairs on the
That's
chin and
dope,
all that
man.
shit, right? So I literally started selling mixtapes at like Islington and Kipling Station. um and that was kind of like my intro. There's a guy named DJ Ewok, and I used to get the tapes from him and the CDs from him, and I get them like he'd front them to me on consignment, and I go out, sell them, bring them back XYZ dollars, keep the rest for myself, and that's kind of how it got going. And then probably like grade that was like grade 9, 10, and then in grade 10 or 11, I met a guy named DJ Fatlip, um, who actually is now like still out in the world doing his thing. He's like a huge promoter in the Caravana scene. A guy named AK from Reps Up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Me and
yeah.
it,
Okay.
okay, so me and AK went to high school together for a little bit,
Oh,
and he was DJ Fatlip back then,
oh,
which I don't know if I should put him
pause,
on blast like that, but
pause.
yeah,
DJ Fat Lip.
yeah. I mean, he was a solid guy and a really good person even then, and basically was getting service vinyl. He was getting service vinyl from the record companies. He was getting records as a DJ
Oh
even
wow.
at that point, like when we were super young. And he brought me for my first time down to BMG and brought me to a major label for my first time when I was like, again, probably grade 10 or 11. And from that point, I met a woman named Carrie Riley, and Joanne, who are, Carrie Riley's now director of marketing at Sony Music. It's crazy to see how things have happened. They were doing street team stuff. And that's how, kind of how I got my start. I came back a couple years later. Um, we started the first iteration or the first version of the remix project was this thing called the IC Visions project. And IC Visions was literally in the basement of a community center. We were open for 2 days a week, Saturday and Sunday afternoons for a couple hours a day. And it was basically like turntables for public use. There was a spot to break dance. There was place for art. You know, um, we have open mics once a month, and then we started doing battles. And during that time, we started to gain some notoriety. We started to gain like people coming from all over the city, from different parts of the city for these battles and for whatnot. And a guy named Click, David Cox, reached out to us and was like, basically, again, he was over at BMG and was like, "Man, I heard you got this community center. I heard you got this hip hop community center." We were in Double XL magazine. They wrote up like this whole article about it, which was crazy for us back then, because Double XL, especially at that time, was like, it was a massive deal. There wasn't like the blogs now and the pages and the
Yep, yep,
IG pages and
yep.
shit. Like this is where you got your information. And for
Definitely.
an American outlet like that to do a write up, it was crazy. So he reached out to us and basically said, I heard you got a hip hop community center. I want to come through and lace you guys with some posters and some flyers and some promo shit and blah blah blah. And basically I turned around and said back to him, I said, look, man, that's cool, but you guys don't have any presence in the West End. Like, that's because I'm from Lakeshore and Islington, right? So I was in Etobicoke, all up and down the West End.
Yeah.
And I was like, you guys have no presence out here. How about you let me be your street team? And then in return, y'all come talk to us, like come teach us about the industry. You know what I mean? Because there's all these hungry people down here trying to learn about the game, trying to get in, but we don't have no information. We don't have no entry point. So I'll put up your flyers, or I'll put out the flyers. I'll go put up your poster boards. I'll go do all that for free if you guys come talk to us. And so we started this workshop series called The Ropes. And we brought down like Ivan Berry, who's a legendary A&R that started like the Beat Factory series back in the day. We brought down again like Kerry Riley and different people like, and Click, of course, and to talk about marketing and street marketing and all that type of stuff. And that's kind of how we got on. Was starting to learn about that. And then as I got deeper and deeper into doing street marketing for them, I started going downtown, which to me was a big deal because I was, again, I was in the West End. Going downtown was a thing. So to leave the neighborhood and actually make that trip, was kind of leaving the safety blanket a little bit and kind of being like stepping out of the comfort zone. And I would go down there and start picking up, the new materials that we needed, learning about what the new projects were. And as folks started graduating in that space, so like David Cox, Click, and Jen Highland ended up going from street marketing to national street marketing. So then I was interning under them. And then Click got hired at Universal as one of the first, which is crazy to say because it was only 2005 something. And he was one of the first Black A&Rs in the history of Canadian, major labels, which is insane. Wow, I think that it's only that recent, right? Ivan Berry was there before him. But really it was like Ivan and Kamara are the only two people I could think of in that A&R space historically at a major label. And even they were only there for a couple of years prior. So Click went to Universal, Jen Highland went into the A&R system at BMG, and I started interning in the A&R system under her. And I started learning, it's everyone always talks about A&R, all it is finding talent. And there's a lot of unsexy work and not fun shit that comes along with it. And it's the real work. That's why it's an industry, So I'm there booking flights for people, booking studio sessions, booking hotel rooms, making sure everyone's got to get where they're getting to, basically doing the A&R admin type stuff. And then I would get place these massive boxes of demos that would get sent in, and I'd listen to the demos and kind of check. And anything that was interesting enough, I would pass on up, to the A&Rs that actually had a decision making, because I had zero power in the building. But it was a really cool kind of eye-opening experience and learning about, how the back end of these labels work, So I went from interning in street marketing to interning at national marketing to interning into the A&R department and learning all the different aspects. And then during that time, I was also managing a rapper who I met through the program, through IC Visions, our first program, a guy named Rochester, aka Juice, and a production company called Tone Mason. And we had this whole little clique that we had called Foundation, probably from 2004 to 6 in there somewhere. Yeah. And Rochester had won, so I started managing him, whatever that means. At that time it meant just trying to run around the city and try to get us shows and basically put on our own shows and whatever. And then he ended up winning this Flow Soul Search, and that was kind of the first big thing. It ended up getting us a record deal, and we signed our first record deal. I was probably 20, 21. And we signed our first deal with something called Maple Music, which fast forward is now Cadence Music and our label partner today on the public record side. But that was a huge experience for me. We went on a national tour with Obi Trice, who was an artist that was signed to Eminem at the time, and he'd just gone platinum on his first album. We opened for him. We basically packed a bunch of us into 2 Nissan Altimas, and we drove across the country following his tour bus, up all night, just, trying to make it from city to city on time, and literally raiding his dressing room every night for his leftover per diems and whatever. We were taking all the M&Ms and all the food and stuff that was left from the night before to have our breakfast, you know, the next day. And we
Wow.
would drive to the next city, you know, grab some Tim Hortons for lunch, and then the promoter would pay for dinner. And that's how we kind of existed, just making it. But we really like kind of bootstrapped it from the ground up. But all of those experiences, you know, like from inside the label to then doing the management thing, from selling the mixtapes. And then at that time, around that time too, I had started doing college radio with a guy named DJ Grouch and a guy named Contagious, and a few other people were in and out of there, Real Deal, um, and Fingerprints and whatnot. But Grouch and Contagious really brought me up and really introduced me to a lot of the scene and put me on. And I met a lot of the community that's still my community to this day through doing college radio for those 10 years.
Wow.
Over at York University, you know, and that taught me so much. That's where I started basically writing bios for people. People would come into the spot, and you know, I'd do interviews and be like, we'd be like, yo, where's your bio? Where's your press kit? Nobody would have a bio, and I'd be like, yo, I could write. So I would put my hand up and I'd start writing these bios. And then my boy Brian Espiritu, who went on to found this thing called Legends League, which is obviously a super dope streetwear brand. He was like sleeping at the community center that we'd started a lot of times, and he talks about it openly on his blog and talks about it on his page, and has a lot. You know, when he didn't want to go home, he would just crash on the couch basically in the studio that we built. And this was our studio, actually. We had an independent studio through this space. And he would basically do the press kits, he would do the graphics, he would do the visuals, I would do the bio, and then together we would help put together these press kits. And that's kind of how we met a lot of the city. Was starting, the words got out like, hey, these guys could go do that for you, like they'll help you out. And so, you know, while all that was happening, I went on that tour with Rochester, and like I said, we really just kind of made it work, you know, and like you said, make it happen. We call ourselves the Make It Happen Gang at Remix. And while I was gone, my partner in IC Visions was a guy named Drex, and who went on to become one of the co-founders of Remix as well. And he started the recording studio side of what we were doing. So he basically started this whole recording studio where we rented the basement of a small business center in South Etobicoke. And we didn't have enough funding to pay ourselves and pay for the rent. So we literally paid ourselves, and then we took our salary, such as it is, and paid the rent on the building. And then after hours, we would run a for-profit studio where we would then make our money to live. You know what I mean? So we would run, basically, we ran the nonprofit side of IC Visions. We just had enough money to pay for the rent of the space. We basically do all the programming for free. And then after hours, we'd be recording other artists in the city. And again, that's how we started building relationships. You know, I taught myself Pro Tools just to like get the basics of it. And a lot of folks came up out of that space as well. Like, you know, Nemesis, the videographer and director, he was a rapper at the time. Yeah, so Nem was a rapper back then. That's when we first met, was through that program. You know, Ricky Ricardo, who manages Division, was a young guy that was coming down with his crew, and he was rapping at the time.
And you birthed a lot of people, man.
I didn't birth them. I was just around, you know, like we were just around, like hanging out, trying to make it together, trying to figure it out, you know. But it was cool. There was a lot of good people. Pro Logic, that does Nav's music,
Yeah,
and a lot of Preem's music and whatnot, was actually like a youth in the program, and then was one of our first program leaders that we hired from the community as well. And about 2005, you know, we had a really hard year in the city. It was what was popularly known at the time as Summer of the Gun. And it was basically a time where a record number of young people were getting killed, you know, and were killing each other. And they were on both sides of the gun, right? And so we had developed a reputation for being frontline in the community, you know, where folks were coming from, right? And where folks were involved and engaged. And so basically a guy named Kane De Ba, who was working with the city at the time, and a couple other spots, came to us and said, you know, what would you guys do with a lot more funding? What would you do with more support? And, you know, we took a step back. We started thinking about it. Around that time, we lost some friends to both sides of the trigger, to be honest. Some people got killed, some people went to jail. And we really had to take that step back and think about like, well, what are we really doing here? Like, if we can't, if our friends are dying, if our friends are going to jail, if our friends are like, everyone's caught up in this shit, like, what are we actually doing? What are we missing? Like, how do we turn this thing that we're all so passionate about into a real career, into a life, that can like get us out of this shit? And so that was, that year we took a step back. We looked at our wins, we looked at our losses. We had some real hard, honest conversations with ourselves, with our peers, and we started figuring out like, okay, what does this look like? And that's where the Remix Project was born. And it was basically born as the remix of the IC Visions project, because we didn't have a better name for it at the time.
Yeah.
So we literally were just calling it.
Oh, wow. You just remixed
it was crazy. Yeah. Real Remix started in 2006. So that's like damn near 15 years now. Jeez. Right. It's been a long journey, and that's why we've been blessed to like be around so many amazing people, is just because we're kind of some of the last people standing, like that are still here, that are still pursuing this, that are still pushing. And it's a generation of kids that, again, this is like pre-internet and whatever. So we're all at the same parties, we're all at the same concerts, we're all bumping into each other. Like there's this famous painter named Jean-Michel Basquiat, of course, from New York, right? And he used to say, like, in New York, there's the downtown 500, and it would be like the same 500 kids at every art show, at every photography show, at every concert, at every party, at every club. And I used to joke and say, like, Toronto has the downtown 200, and it would be like the kind of the same 200 kids, like pretty much going around, and we would all get to know each other, like that's where I first met 40 at a spot called Riley's, where every Wednesday night they had $9 pitchers of rum and Coke, and they would play classic hip hop. And that's where like so many of the kids from all over the city, a guy named Jay Devenish, who's now one of the lead people at E1 and has a really great grant writing company called DMC Group. Him and Ken Masters, who's close with Boy Wonder and helped start a lot of that movement up, One Music at the time. They were throwing this night with a couple of other people called Sold Out at Riley's. And so we would all just hang out there. And, I joke now and I just say again to people, like, it's not some like conspiracy theory. It's just like, who's left? Like out of all those 200 kids that were always there, there's like 15 of us that are still pushing this music thing, and everyone else got a real job or fucking, or passed on, or, went to jail, got deported, fucking whatever happened, but there's a few of us that are left that can still remember those times and make those jokes and whatever. And so you kind of check for each other, like you were there from that era. And that was the come up, that was the formation of the city, really, like in those points. And once Remix got started, it was really about us trying to figure out, how do we create a safe, supportive space where talented young people from all across the city, because we had people coming from Scarborough, from Finch, from Rex, from Jungs, like everywhere, from Parkdale, like all over to one space, right? And it was a drop-in program at the time when we started with IC Visions. And shit was getting hectic. Like it was getting a little crazy, because again, it was drop-in, it was first come, first serve. People would be lined up to use the studio for 3 hours. We're like, no, there's gotta be a better way. So we really thought about, like, if we're gonna make an impact, we need to do deep investment. Like it's all good to do these larger things here and there where you're doing like a large conference and you're speaking to 500 people and whatever. But if you're really going to see a difference, like, you're going to have to do deep investment in individuals. You're going to have to spend months and months together, if not longer, really working at the craft, connecting folks, and helping them and helping ourselves, really, because there's us and our peers. But as we go older, helping other people navigate what was going on in their life, because you can't concentrate on being the best graphic designer in the city if you're getting the shit kicked out of you every night. You know what I mean? Like, you can't concentrate on being the best producer if you don't know where you're going to sleep. So a lot of it, like, we started really a wraparound support, where we were helping people with everything from housing, to addiction, to jail. Like, I've bailed so many people out in my life. It is ridiculous. Like, they used to know me at 1000 Finch very well. Like, and the lawyers would see me coming, and be like, oh, this fucking guy again. And, like, we were out there, like, really frontline, investing deeply in individuals and in people that we thought were special, and that we thought that deserved that energy, and we thought that they brought something to the table, and that it wasn't just that, like, you know, um, they were missing out on something. It was that society was also missing out. The culture was missing out if those people weren't involved. You know what I mean? So it was about the individual, but it was recognizing that the community was going to come up, the community was going to benefit, by having this deep investment in these young people. And because then each one teach one, it's going to sprinkle out. These
Yep.
folks that become these successful artists or successful clothing lines are going to hire their peers. They're going to hire other designers. They're going to hire people to work in their stores. They're going to hire road managers, merch people, what have you. But unless we have somebody really pop, we're not going to have an industry to stand on, right? And we're not going to have the ability for other people to see a difference in their own lives and see a change in their own lives. And so it was really about this idea of like, how do we do deep investment in the few so that we can impact the many?
Wow, that's deep.
Yeah, that was a lot. And there's definitely a lot more, but I'll stop for
That
a
no,
second.
that's really deep, man. Like I said, like you've been around for a minute, and a lot of people left, and you still standing. You know what I mean? It's because I've been watching the journey over time. That's why I'm saying you inspire me to do what I'm doing. You know what I mean? If somebody like you didn't do what you doing with Remix Project, I would never in my right mind to think, oh, I could do up next and inspire other creatives and push artists in the city. Because the main reason why I started doing what I'm doing is because of Remix Project. And at the time, I was older. I couldn't get in the Remix Project. I was like, damn, I gotta find something to do. This. That's how I started my own movement because I couldn't get into the Remix Project. No cap. I'm just being really honest with you.
No, that's dope, man. And I love that. Like I always say, like, it's not like you have to go to Remix to make it, right? Like it was just, it's a community, and people start communities. There's all sorts of successful communities that are now emerging out of the city and have emerged from other places. And we look to people for our inspiration.
Yep,
Like
yep,
at
yep.
the time, like we didn't know, when we got started, we didn't know about um what do you call it, like where Cardi and Little X or Director X, and Julie Black and all them came out of. But once we got started, we actually got put onto some information. We started realizing there was a program before us that was called Fresh Arts.
Yep,
And
yep.
there was that Fresh Arts movement is, again, kind of like Director X came out there, Choclair, Cardinal, Julie Black, like all these people, as well as promoters, that were big nightclub promoters in the city. And those are folks that, as we started to learn more, we started to look up to and want to be like, and want to open more doors. And like everything in this world comes from inspiration, pretty much,
Facts.
right? And so
Yep,
I think like the best way to you know improve your own ideas is to do research and have more reference points.
yeah,
And the more reference points you have, then the more that you can start to pull together, um like what works for you, right? Because like it's not about copying something, but it is about looking at things and being like, okay, that makes sense, that makes sense, that's dope, that doesn't make no sense, that doesn't work here, that
yep,
whatever. And then pulling the different pieces together to create your own thing. Because again, we all come from these different, like, we're all standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us, right? Like literally in terms of like we're coming from the DNA of two humans that came before us, but
mhm,
also figuratively in terms of our society, right? And looking at like whether it's a painting, whether it's a photograph, whether it's music, hip hop culture is based largely, or at least initially was based so much on sample culture, right? And so it really is about knowing what came before you, finding those inspiration points, and then being able to like flip those things into something new.
yep. You're definitely right about that. The reason that I was so fascinated by Remix, it felt like it was like a secret society somewhat. You know what I mean? And the first creative that came out at a Remix that I was following was a young lady named Carla Moore. I think that's her name.
Yeah, yeah, Hustle Girl for sure, Carla
Hustle
Moore.
Girl. That's her. She was the designer for Drake's fan page, All Things Fresh, and I
Yeah,
used to follow that page religiously, just follow everything she posted, and
yeah,
she
yeah,
used to
yeah.
she used to talk about remix projects so much,
She
and
was
that's
15 when she was doing that, which is
how.
insane. Yeah. She was 13. She designed her first mixtape cover for Lil Wayne somehow on the internet. And then she was 15. We were supposed to start 16 years old, 16 to 22 was our thing, but we are like, no, we have to get this woman in the program. She's amazing. and she's super talented. And I remember I had to meet with her parents, because like many people, like, Canada, we're all from somewhere, right? And so her folks had come to Canada, and it was not for her to become a designer for rappers, like it was like, what, you want to do, what you want to like work with rappers, like, huh? No, not my daughter. Not at 15, like, you better go to school, you better whatever. And we actually, I remember we had to meet with her parents and like say like, look, graphic design is an introduction to so many places. Graphic design is a language, like she can start in this space, and God willing, she has a great career in culture, but she could just as well take this and start designing things for film, for television. She could design things, cereal boxes, like she could design shoes for Nike. Like, design is a language that, and a passport that's going to take her so far if she learns the basic principles, more than just kind of slapping a few things that look together. And it's been amazing to see what she's been able to accomplish over the years, like seeing her end up in these kind of 30 under 30 lists and
Crazy.
whatnot, and what have you. It's been phenomenal. She's actually, to this day, she's actually on our board of directors at Remix. So she graduated years ago, and then we ended up hiring her as a staff person, because we hire a lot of people that come out of the program
Yeah.
as our youth leaders, or as our program leaders, than as our program leaders, because who better to help someone navigate the program than someone that just successfully navigated it themselves.
Yeah.
And also, we recognize that just because you graduate doesn't mean like you're set now.
Yep.
A lot of people are still trying to figure it out, and the missing piece to the equation is often capital. It's money, right? So we would hire a lot of young people that were coming out of the program to, one, make sure that there's now voices from the community that were like leading the program, and that had a direct relationship to like how it could be improved and why. But also because, again, we wanted to continue to do a deeper investment in the individuals. Like a lot of the staff people from Remix have also gone on to do amazing things, which has been a really something that I'm really proud of as well, because it was, again, recognizing these young talents that were special but needed a home and a steady source of income and a supportive space and some credibility kind of in the community and in the industry, outside of whatever they were doing as like a club promoter. Like, with T-Rex, like T-Rex was a club promoter, and he was just starting to get into like club promotions and parties and stuff like that. And when I met him, he was going through some things. And one of our good friends, mutual friends, was a guy named Lo, who connected us. And I was just like, yo, this guy's brilliant. Like, this guy's on some shit. Like, he's so charismatic. He's such a leader. And I was like, man, you want to run the business program we're starting? Like, we're starting this thing next year. And he was just kind of like, what? Yeah, me? Sure. Like, he had just come back from university. He was playing ball on a scholarship, and ended up leaving because he was going through some crazy shit in the States, on these small town, like racist ass places. And he was like, nah, fuck this. I'm going back to Toronto. And, we gave him this opportunity, and he thrived. He did phenomenal. And they built like their business doing parties out of there. The whole One Love TO thing kind of, it emerged from that. That One Love TO started as a float that the mayor at the time, David Miller, asked us to put together for Carabana. And they asked Remix Project, can you put together a float for the mayor's office for Toronto? And I was like, yo, Rex, like, what do this is not my world, this is your world, bro. Like, what do you think? And he was thinking about it with some people, and they're bouncing ideas off, and they're like, like this whole I love New York thing and whatever, like, that's all dope, and it's obviously huge, but like, it's very singular, it's very of the I. And like Toronto, like, especially with Carabana, like, we want to embrace like this idea of one love, and so it became One Love Toronto, which is welcoming, which is bringing people in. It's not just about the I, it's about the we. And so that started as a float that our boy Royals printed the t-shirts for, who was in the program at the time. And that float and the t-shirts took off so much, they started printing more shirts, and they started a business, which then turned into a blog, which became like a whole movement. And they started doing parties and events, and it was amazing to see. But like a guy like T-Rex, a woman like Amanda Paris, like I met her, she was coming out of university, she was getting ready to graduate, and we were on a panel for a foundation, talking about youth engagement and stuff. And afterwards, we took a walk for like an hour and talked about everything from like community development to X-Men. And I was like, yo, she's the shit. Like, you got to come work with us, please. And she became one of the first community engagement people that we had in the program. And it's been incredible to watch her journey. And now she's over at CBC, like producing hosting television shows. She hosts the radio show Marvin's Room, whatever. A guy like 40 as a program leader. Like that whole movement, a lot of them connecting at the Remix Project for the first time. Like 40 becoming a program leader. We had just lost our program leader for recording arts, and um, like I said, I'd met 40 in Riley's, and I remember I hadn't talked to him again. And then one day he called me and was like, "Yo, you work with Tone Mason, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He's like, "Yo, so this guy?" And there's a manager in the States we were all trying to go through at the time. I was like, "Yeah, I know him." And he's like, "Yeah. Can you just tell him I'm dope? Because like I kind of told him like I used your name, and I just want to give you a heads up that I used your name to like get through blah blah blah." And I was like, "Yeah, cool, man. I think your shit's dope, man. I know your music, like you're fire, bro." And so then we started linking up from there. And once we had the new job, we called him in and gave him that space. And then after hours he would be recording Drake in the studio. Future the Prince was a young man in the business program learning the business of being a DJ. Wow. And Carla, as you said, was there. She was doing graphic design and started building the fan site out for them. And then Brian Brock and Brian Spiritu did like the artwork for Comeback Season, and all that stuff started to come together. And then they got their shot to go to LA to go ghostwrite, for the Detox album that we're all still waiting for from Dr. Dre back in like 2007 or 8 or whatever.
If Drake got a nice paycheck out of that, that's never gonna come out.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people got a great paycheck out of that. It just is what it is, But God bless Dr. Dre for helping so many people along the way on their career without that album ever coming out. The budget line has to be like 15 million in the hole or something, like how much they've spent over the decades, of that never coming out.
He's got a billionaire now, so he got enough money.
Oh, he's good. He's like, you keep throwing money against the wall. You can keep putting it into a trash can and setting it on fire to keep everybody else warm, But yeah, like, like I remember that at that time we were, 40 was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go to LA." We were like, "Yeah, go, bro. Like, you crazy? Like, do it. Your job will be here when you get back." And and then he went, and we were continuing to support from that point. And then one thing after another, obviously Drake got more opportunities and things went together. But again, like, it's creating those spaces. After that, Division came through. Daniel Daly from Division became the program leader for a while at Remix, and they recorded the entire Division album there. So again, a lot of the staff that came out of that space, from Amanda Paris and T-Rex and now Ricky and Carla Moy, Hustle Girl, all them, like, I'm really proud that we were able to create that space, because again, it was a necessary safe space, not just for the participants, but also for the staff to find their footing, and to have a place that had a steady income for a bit, that was still focused in their area of interest, that was still focused in like within the culture that they were all trying to make their mark within. Yeah. And opened up new opportunities for folks there too. So there's a really beautiful legacy that comes out of that organization, that really just boils down to people supporting one another, people checking for one another, people recommending each other for stuff, and just basically trying to see folks win. And so, like, as much as you're saying like it was like a secret club or whatever, like, it wasn't so much that, as much as it was like, again, this desire to do deep investment in individuals, and knowing that if we tried to be everything to everyone, we would lose and we would fail. Yeah. And so what we needed to do was really do deep investment in those individuals while still trying to be open. Like, that's why we would do even talks like this. It wasn't digital at the time, but we'd be going to do talks at different community centers. We'd be doing things at larger things that were trying to spread the information, trying to share as much knowledge as we could, resources, etc. We would do larger workshops that were open to the general public, but the program itself had to be focused on individuals because it needed that focus for folks to be able to thrive.
Yep. One thing I take out everything that you said, it's crazy how kind and selfless that you are. You know what I mean? You don't think of yourself, you think about everybody else getting a paycheck. Not one time you mentioned about yourself getting a paycheck, making sure your family's right. You thinking about everybody else getting a job, making sure everybody else pay their bills.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had a check from the program, I mean, there's definitely times where we took that check to put it back into the program, because that's what entrepreneurs do. Like, there's so many entrepreneurs in this room, that know what exactly what we're talking about. I know that you know what I'm talking about. Like, you get
Facts.
the money that you're getting from your business, you have to reinvest right away if you want to see that business thrive, right? Like, you can't just turn around and go buy J's, like, it's, like, cool, you're gonna have those for a couple months and then what? Nah, you got to go buy a new computer, you got to go fix your camera, you got to go level up the microphone or invest in studio time. Like,
Yeah.
reinvesting in yourself was important. But like, I would say too, like, I always say to folks, like, it wasn't like I was, just like Mother Teresa out here, like, like, whatever. Like, I was getting a check. It wasn't great money, but it allowed me to survive,
Facts.
and have like my little apartment in Parkdale, and keep it moving, where again I could then be connected to all these other people. Like, the experiences that I got out of that, while again it never made me rich in terms of my pockets, the experiences that it gave me allowed me to move into other areas of life, and opened up other doors and created networks that I never would have had. Like, I've had the opportunity to interview everyone from, like, we brought Kendrick Lamar to Toronto for his very first time ever. We
Wow.
did his first
Wow.
show right when Section 80 just came out, and that mixtape was about to drop, and I interviewed him in Remix. And but and it was just incredible. Like, he dropped verses that later ended up on albums and stuff. People were Toronto was Toronto, they showed up, they're like, yo, you rap, so rap then. Like, I remember Pyrex was probably like 15 or 16, and Pyrex was in the program at the time, and he was like, yo, come on, so spit, bro. If you spit,
Yeah.
and like made this guy spit on the spot, and the verse was phenomenal. But like, we celebrated his birthday, it was amazing. But like, we got to build real relationships there with like Dave Free, his tour manager at the time, who obviously is doing incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Interview Raekwon, interview Virgil Abloh, interview like all these different people that have inspired me and have allowed me to learn more information and build my network to get to the place where I want to be. So like, you have to look at those opportunities all the time, right? Like, how do you put yourself in a room with people that are going to open up doors for you, with people that are going to open up information for you, that are going to open up networks for you,
Yeah.
and help you get a step further in your journey,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because it is a step-by-step process. Everyone wants to skip steps, but like, it never works that way. Not really. Like,
You're
there's
right.
a one unicorn story where something happens here, something happens there, but 9 times out of 10, like, people did a step-by-step process. They paid dues, they put in work, they worked for free, they invested in themselves, understanding that that was a long-term vision that they're chasing after, that was going to be 10 years until they were an overnight success. Like, that kind of age-old saying is true, right? And so that for me was the reward, right? It was, the payoff was twofold. One, knowing that this community that I had benefited so much from, in terms of like just being a music lover, and coming up, I used to sell, I also skipped over, but we had like a clothing line in grade 11. We were selling t-shirts and had this whole thing called Manifest, where a couple of us had a clothing line, and we're hustling or whatever. But like, I gained so much from participating in the culture, and from listening to the music, and from just like kind of benefiting on the periphery. And so I was always trying to figure out, well, how can I
Give back.
participate in a way and give back, and participate in a way that was authentic, to my own experience, because
Oh.
I'm not a lot of things,
Yep.
so who am I, and where do I fit, and asking those questions, and trying to find those answers was like really kind of what led my journey.
Yeah, you're right. And one thing I noticed about everything you said, right, about all the people that came from Remix, such as 40, Division, Drake, it was even started from the Remix project. If you think about it, the Remix project kind of like shaped the city for what it is. It kind of like shaped the whole world. It kind of shaped and changed the whole music industry for somewhat. You know what I mean? Because if that space wasn't there for everyone to connect, then probably Drake probably wouldn't meet 40, or Hustle Girl probably would have been there to start the All Things Fresh fan page. A lot of things wouldn't happen, and hip hop wouldn't be where it's at without the Remix project. You know what I mean? So if you go
I mean,
deep
it's
down,
it's it's wild to think about
yeah,
sometimes, for sure. I mean, definitely. I mean, Drake and 40 met on their own. They met at a video
yeah,
shoot. And I'd like to think that that would happen regardless, because those two talents are just so special that no matter what, they would happen. But yeah, a lot of people might not have crossed paths, right? And crossing paths and recognizing again where you're weak is one of the most important things you could ever do, because once you recognize where you're weak, then you can figure out what kind of team you need to build,
Yep, yep,
right?
yep, yep.
So being like, okay, cool, I can't do graphic design, I can't do photography, I can't do this, I can't do that. I'm shit at following up with people. Whatever it is, recognizing where you're weak is the first key towards building a strong team,
Hmm.
right? It's people always say, I need another me, I need another me, I need another me. No, you don't. You have you. You're already great. That's why you're you. What do you need? You need someone who's not you, someone who can handle the shit that you're not good at, that you can't do, that you don't have the abilities to do, not just that you don't have the time for. Right. And so, because people will do that and they'll be like, oh, I just need an intern to do these little things. Like, cool, you need an equal, who's great at something else.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's no remix project without Drex. You know what I mean? Like, Kane Day really at the jump too, like, helped get it off the ground. He got in doors we never could have got in. He
Mhm.
opened up like lines of thinking and really helped shape the base philosophy of that space. And then Drex is like, that guy's managing budgets, figuring out the workflow, staying on top of people while I'm fucking off thinking about ideas and talking about politics and social shit and whatever.
Mhm.
Like, you have to really figure out again, like, where are you weak, and then go and find those equals of you who are strong in other spaces, and then shape that team, build that together, and then move forward. And I think that's what Remix really allowed us to do. It was purposely creating different streams of programming, like creative arts, the art of business, and the recording arts, and putting them all under one roof, because young, talented, creative people needed to meet other young, talented, creative people for this thing to take off. These young engineers needed to meet young recording artists. The young graphic designer needed to meet the young photographer, and the young clothing line
Oh,
needed to meet the designer, and the photographer to do the lookbooks, and the artist needed stuff to wear. And it was creating a ecosystem where everybody can keep supporting one another and starting to rise as they go, and recognizing that we're not one person armies. We need to be looking out there and figuring out, like, what do I need and how do I make it work. And then in past that, I think where the magic lay was making sure that it wasn't just transactional, meaning that it didn't just feel like you're taking, and maybe you're paying for something as you go, but we're building community. So people are really checking for each other. You're going through different lived experiences together. And there's a deeper investment, there's an emotional investment in seeing somebody win. And
yeah.
that's what we were able to accomplish, I think, that I was really proud of.
Definitely, you guys accomplished a lot, and you guys have inspired a lot. I feel like the remix project kind of like created this whole thing that's going on with this whole six buzz, different blogs, different creatives, different designers are coming out. Remixers really inspired and create a lot of creatives to be creative, because the education system hasn't pretty much kept up with how society has changed. We into like the social media age, and we're into the graphics age, and people are creating apps. People become billionaires of creating a app. You know what I mean? Nobody, they're not keeping up with with the way society is changing. So what I wanted to ask you, like, how do you feel the education system in Canada can improve to like to better engage like young people?
I think it's exactly that. It's definitely like, for us, it's always been about starting where people are.
Yeah.
Instead of like telling people come over here, it's about going to where people are at,
Yeah.
and both literally but also like metaphorically. Like, where are you, what are you into, what is your means of communication, what is your language,
Hmm.
like in terms of like a visual language or like a digital language or what have you. And how do you go towards where people are and use passion as a tool to educate, right? Because to me, like, I did grade 10 math 3 times. You couldn't get me to go to math class. Like, it was not my shit at all. But like, once I started to learn about budgeting, because I needed to put a record out,
Hmm.
you know, that's when I started taking things serious. So for me, it was about, okay, well, then budgeting for a record and whatnot, that's going to be the entry point to talking to people about budgeting for your life. that's going to talk about, okay, well, how do you budget, for rent and groceries and all these other things? Like, how do you become responsible, in terms of like how you manage money? Because up until that point, it was just kind of do what was coming in and out. Like, it was just, there's no plan. And so, finding a point of passion and then using that point of passion as an engagement point is something that's so important. And I think it really is about smaller class sizes, because you can't do that in large class sizes. And so I really think that, you know, um, there are moments for large group-based learning, like lectures and what have you, but the majority of your time in any type of educational system should have smaller groups, smaller class sizes, to really allow that deep investment that I was talking about earlier to happen within individuals.
So, with the success of the Remix project and the fact that you guys been in business for about 15 years and still going, uh, have you been in contacts with the Canadian government or even the Ontario government to pretty much implement the Remix project in different schools or even opening
Yeah.
more Remix projects? You feel me?
Yeah,
Because
I mean, we've definitely had a lot of conversations over the years. We've tried different things. We've tried programs in some of uh, in some of the jails. We've tried programs in some schools and hybrid stuff. And our thing was like, we don't want to be the McDonald's of the social world. Like, we don't have the ability to do it. Like, we're good at what we do because we know our community, and we know, the entry points, and we know, like, also the exit points. Like, we have the ability to kind of connect people to, mentorships, job opportunities, whatever, because we know these spaces.
yeah,
We don't know those spaces in other cities. We don't know those spaces in other places. So what we've always tried to do is be copy left, where we share the information. Like, here's how we got started. Here's what we do. Here's how we do it. Here's why we do it.
mhm,
Take it, start something yourself. Like, we want to see other things pop up, because, you know, even in terms of the city itself, if we want to scale back to Toronto, like, we have 600 to 800 young people, depending on the year, apply for 45 spots in the program. It's insane. So, but it shows that the demand is out there. And
definitely.
so that demand needs to be met. But what I will say also is that there's only so much that the market can bear, right? Like,
Yeah,
there's only so many new photographers that can come on the scene every year that's going to get XYZ projects, because there's not that many projects with real budgets that are happening, right? There's only so many producers that are going to come out. There's only so many artists that the 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 general public can take and ingest and listen to and whatever, right?
nice, nice, nice.
Um, and so again, like, we felt like doing deep investment in individuals and having small class sizes and helping people, in a way that we could see entry points from
Mhm,
folks. Like, okay, so, like, because again, we have 15 people in creative arts, 15 people in business, 15 people in the recording arts program, and even they're broken down, like 3 photographers, 5 graphic designers,
wow,
4 videographers, whatever it is, to get to 15
yeah,
people of different skill sets and different spaces. Because again, if we tried to graduate 50 people, yes, there might be a demand for that many in terms of wanting to be in the program, but is there a demand, or is there room for that many people graduating from the space?
yeah,
Now, we didn't want to set people up for false promises. It's already incredibly competitive industry, like the creative industries.
right,
And so, like, how do, we're already going to have people that are going to have trouble taking the next step and the next step and the next step once they leave here, just because of the nature of the industry that we're all trying to get into and trying to thrive within.
yeah,
So, I think it was us trying to be responsible, by keeping it small and compact and
mhm,
doing those deep investments. But yeah, like, we share our information. We've shared our information. We've been part of international networks as well. We did a lot of work with UN Habitat, which is the division of the United Nations that focuses on cities, like urban centers. And we had partner programs in Brazil. There's actually a whole documentary. If you want to see some wild shit, type remix to Rio in YouTube, like Rio de Janeiro,
yeah,
remix to you Rio. And if you can't find it, it's I Love Ravi, R-A-V-I. I Love Ravi, all one word. Remix to Rio. And there's a documentary about us going to Rio de Janeiro, and helping to build a remix project type program out there and bringing a recording studio out there, whatever. And the participants are a young Future the Prince, who was a young DJ in the program at the time, young Ricky Ricardo, who's now Division's tour manager, was a participant in the program.
Wow.
TG, who's now the creative director for OVO, one of the creative directors of OVO, and Roxanne Garraway, who's like a phenomenal photographer who ended up going back to Brazil several times and running a video program. She does video and whatnot. And then T-Rex is there, myself, Drex. It's wild, but you can go see that. And we've been sharing that whole thing, this information and this thing from 2009 or whenever that was. To programs in Brazil, Colombia, as well as here. We're actually helping some organizations in Halifax. We've been trying to get some stuff going. In Vancouver, we've been trying to get some stuff going.
Well, I see I've got a remix in Chicago too, so that's
we've had a chapter in Chicago because our co-founder Drex went and lived in Chicago for a few years, and as he was living there, people were like, "What do you do? What do you do?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I help run this organization back home. I do the finances. I can do it from my laptop anywhere I am. Blah blah blah." And they were like, "Man, we need something like that. Like, what, y'all have that in Toronto? Like Chicago, this is, drill, this is all that shit. Like, we need that shit out here, like badly." And so we started a program out there after we were invited in by the community. It wasn't us going down there being like, we're gonna go start Remix in Chicago. It was like Drex living there for a few years and then being asked by the community and invited by the community and then hiring local people to run the organization and sharing the information and helping with the finances from the back end and getting it off the ground. It wasn't just like we just opened a chapter in Chicago. Like that shit wouldn't work.
Yeah, you're definitely right. And one thing I took in from what you said is about sharing information. That's something I like doing as well. If I read a book and I feel like it could benefit some other people, I'll give them the book, or I'll write my own book of the information and how I learned it and how people could probably understand it from my point of view. You know what I mean? That's what I like to do. So I like to share information. One thing I noticed when it comes to the culture, people don't like sharing information. If people know a plug, they're gonna keep the plug in their pocket and don't do nothing with the plug. Don't do nothing with the information. You know what I mean? So
that's just not me. It's not who I am, because there's a certain extent, like, you got to be respectful of the plug, right? Like, that person might not want you giving out their information left, right, and center. But if they're cool with you sharing the information and it's something dope,
beneficial, yeah, for
pass
sure.
it on, make the connection, because you never know how it's going to come back around to you. Like, I've lived enough years now, I've had enough life experiences where I've seen how things come back around, and opportunities happen again, and things that, maybe weren't meant for you at the time, but you helped put together, and you were kind of, frustrated or sad that you were left out, or you were pissed off that whatever XYZ happened, but you played it smooth, you played it cool, you didn't melt it down, you didn't burn a bridge, and that shit comes back around, and people end up checking for you and opening a door and whatever. And that's just the way you gotta go. But I also operate from a place of confidence.
Yeah.
Because I feel like being able to share connections is actually like a place of confidence, because that what you do is so dope,
facts,
and that it's yours, that it doesn't matter if you share the connect, because what you do is so dope, it don't matter, because they're still gonna want to fuck with you, they're still gonna want to work with you. So, like, I'll share the information because you still gonna want to fuck with me. You don't want to fuck with me no more, you crazy. Then I'm gonna go over here. Like,
you don't fuck with me, bro. What do you mean? You would catch
like,
me
all right,
somewhere, bro.
cool.
You want to catch me in one of these buildings you didn't expect me to be in.
And that's like, that's not to be on some cocky shit, but it is
You have to be,
that is your power, and that, like, people aren't going to do the same thing as you in the same way. Like, even if we sing the same words at the same time, like, we got to find harmony, because it's not going to sound exactly the same at the exact moment.
It's gonna be a different type of sauce. It's not gonna taste the same.
Exactly. So someone's gonna add a little bit too much pepper, someone's gonna add a little bit too much sugar, whatever it is. Like, they're gonna be, that's too sweet, that's too spicy. Like, but it's gonna be a little different, and there's gonna be an audience out there. There's like however many billion people on the planet. So there's an audience out there for me and for you, and we're not stepping on each other's toes by opening doors for one another. If anything, we're just strengthening the place that we come from and the reputation, because even when certain guys were first starting to win, out of the city, and that jealousy was really happening at first. And guys were like, yo, I'm gonna make sure, I'm gonna get this guy, whatever. I'm gonna make sure I rob him for XYZ. And I'd be like, yo, you're fucking crazy, man. This guy wins. It helps all of us.
To inspire you to win, to go after yours.
And not just inspire you, but the way the industry works is like, once OVO team and all those guys started taking off, everybody was coming to Toronto, all the major labels being like, who's next? Who's next? Who's next? That opportunity wouldn't have happened if they didn't win. So we need them to get even bigger, because all these other people are going to come being like, well, where's the next thing that comes out of here? And we've seen so many incredible things. We've seen, from Daniel Caesar to Jesse Reyes, like different movements that have nothing to do with OVO that have popped off and done incredibly well. But as arguably been as a like ripple effect of these first people getting through the door, and Cardinal being one of the people before them that opened that door first, and then they kicked it down all the way, and then the next people came, and the next people came, and the next people came, and now we're seeing all these new movements starting to pop up, and starting to take the world by storm as well, and starting to make their name internationally, and that's inspiring. And so I think like we have to celebrate people winning, because what we don't want to be is St. Louis. We don't want to be Nelly and the Lunatics, right? Where it was like one guy that became this global superstar and had this incredible moment, and then the city got left behind, right? And so I think like we've done a good job of that, I think. But that comes from embracing and celebrating, and then sharing and opening doors, making relationships, and passing that along, because that's legacy. That's how an entire like community gets lifted up, an entire city gets put on like the world stage in popular culture. So anyways, hats off to everybody that's been doing that, and big respect to everybody that's continued to show love, that's continued to reach back, that's continued to open doors and employ people and give them their first shot.
Facts. And one thing that I taken from the whole thing that you said, the whole conversation, is by Remix Project. One thing I realized when it comes to this music industry in Canada, there's a lack of infrastructure. Like there's like people just lose on the lose. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know where to go. They don't know who to talk to. There's no resources. And I feel like the Remix Project kind of like somewhat created like a little infrastructure for artists to go to, for creative to go through. So what's your take on the lack of infrastructure in the city, in Canada in general?
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to how young of a industry we are.
Yeah.
Like the city's real success, like even when I was going back to telling the story earlier, like with David Cox being one of the first Black A&Rs in the country in 2006. Again, there was a couple before him, but like really that was the turning point. That's insane. That just shows you how young of a community we are. And then looking at the artists that have come out, like again, there's a 1-2 person that was able to burst onto the international scene in a Cardinal and whatnot, but their management wasn't here. They were in the States. They were from here, but they weren't living here. And so there wasn't people to learn from.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To your point, like there wasn't an infrastructure. There wasn't a management company to go intern at, outside of Chris Smith, who's another legend who deserves all the flowers. There's like one company, like there's one person that was kind of doing it, whatever. And so in the last decade, you've seen an entire industry really spring up, but it's still a very young industry. There's still massive gaps that exist. There's no Black booking agents in Canada working at a major firm that I know of. There might be someone working in like the administration side, but not as like a booking agent, and there are very few. I don't think there's any radio promoters. There's barely any radio that plays Black music, period.
Jeez.
There are massive gaps in our infrastructure that we still need to fill, as a larger community. And I think that we are on our way. And now there's some management companies and some managers, individuals that you can learn from. There's producers that have found very real success, that are passing the torch, that are, reaching out to the next generation. Like Boy Wonder is a phenomenal example of that. Nino is another great example. Of course, 40 is a great example. 1985 is a great example of people that have reached out to other younger producers and opened the door. And there's plenty more people that I didn't name that are doing amazing work. So that's like, I think that it's growing, but it's going to take time because we're so far behind,
Hmm.
right? And we are having this moment in popular culture where you have The Weeknd and you have Drake and you have, Bieber, even, who's like Toronto-ish, like, and that are like popular culture, Daniel Caesar and whatever, like, um, but again, the infrastructure, the teams around them are often, yeah, Murder Beats another one, like, are the teams around them have been self-taught for the most part.
Yeah.
Like, I remember we did a conversation with Oliver, who founded OVO, the brand, and he was like, "Look, I'm a high school dropout. Like, I'm still figuring this shit out. Like, give me some time. Like, I'm like, and this is only a few years ago.
Make
Like,
it look easy
every
though.
time you get to another level, right? And he gets to
That shit
another
look
level,
really easy.
yeah, but he's like, but we're figuring this shit out. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, I'm learning from older people now and I'm getting it. But like, I just believed in my friend and I rode out with him, like, and tried to do whatever he needed and whatever we had to do to get to the next space and
Yeah.
just be helpful. But there wasn't like a roadmap. And now I feel like there's becoming more of a roadmap. You see programs like Girl Connected, which
Yeah.
has popped up, that Lola runs. Lola's another trailblazer,
Yep. She did.
who's done incredible work, and that, like, um, came out and basically, like, like, took the PR game and took it to another level, like, in this country, and then went to the States and has, like, made an incredible name for herself, but has turned back and started a program called Girl Connected, which helps young women, like, in a mentorship capacity, and introduces them to a wide network of industry professionals, and
Yeah.
does really incredible stuff. So people like her, people like Ruiz, that manages Jesse Reyes, who also co-founded MadRuck, one of the top music video production companies in the country. Those guys started as two guys with digital video cameras, 10 years ago, and were operating out of, they literally ran their business, even their accounting, out of our video editing suite at
Mm.
Remix After Hours. And to see what they've accomplished and what they've grown on their own into what it is now, and then Ruiz to go off and start managing Jesse Reyes and help develop her career and manage that, um, has just been super inspiring. But he's another guy that gives a lot of his time to young entrepreneurs, to young managers, and sharing that information. So I think it's growing. I think that we could definitely use more resources in public spaces, but um, we're going to get there. Like, I've had this vision to have like a YouTube university for a long time, which I'm talking to a platform now about finally getting off the ground, where it's kind of things like this, but it's also like 5-minute interviews with a publicist on how to write a press release. And so it's like, okay, cool. 5 minutes. Here's how to write a press release. Did you remember this? Here's what I do. This is what I think, blah, 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 blah. And then you would have that video, and then next to the video, you'd have a checklist like, did you remember this, and this? And then there'd be a cloud at the bottom. And you could click the link to the cloud and download examples of successful press releases and then templates. Right. And so, like, that's something that I'm really passionate about getting off the ground,
Oh,
is
that's
developing like a series of those things that people could tap into from anywhere in the world, and at least have the basic knowledge and information. You're still going to have to work hard as hell to differentiate yourself from the thousand of other people that are trying to do the same shit as you. But at least the playing field is starting to get leveled in terms of the information that's out there and the resources.
dope, 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 dope information. And just to go back to the team conversation you were having, right? And I feel like the OVO team is kind of like one in a million teams that actually stick together and became successful together, and everybody's eating and everybody's kind of like not envious of the other person and want the other person's spot. What and these days, these days nowadays, I'm noticing a lot of team are falling apart, such as you can see recently in our face, such as the Joe Budden podcast. They just
Right.
kind of like crushed, and they started as a team, as a family. So one
Right.
question I wanted to ask you, like, how do you feel like people in general, or artists in general, could kind of like sustain a team and not having like egos clashing and
Right.
people
Yeah.
want
It's,
to like
it's a hard question. It's a hard question. because it really does come down to the chemistry between individuals, you know, and and ultimately like being able to have an open line of communication and really talk through the hard shit. And once you've talked through it, be able to be cool and keep it moving. Like there's a lot of ego and there's a lot of people that have never learned how to deal with conflict properly.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that that's where a lot of things fall apart is that some sort of conflict happens because it's going to, that's life, right? Like not everything is just smooth sailing all the way through. Like there's going to be conflict that happens, but how do you resolve conflict in a way that allows you to move forward together? You know, too many people emotionally just react emotionally and everything blows up and it turns into a fuck you thing in terms of being like, I'm fucking pissed at you, but not fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, which is a big difference. And I think like that's one of the skills that, you know, to have a strong team is to figure out conflict resolution and to really understand that if we're focused on the same thing, we're arguing over how to make it better. And if someone did something fucked up, then we got to call them out. But it doesn't mean throw them out
Yeah.
necessarily. It could mean that if that's where you have to get to because of what happened, sometimes that has to, it's part of life. Things die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's just the reality of everything. Is that it has its life cycle and recognizing when that life cycle is over. But I think that too many people are quick to throw relationships out because they don't know how to come back from conflict.
Yeah.
They don't know how to come back from an argument. They don't know how to put the ego to the side and recognize that we can fight passionately about something, but that's because we're trying to get to this place together and we demand excellence from each other.
Facts.
And so, you know, that's a big part of it, but it's, you know, you got to have the right personalities, and I think that some of these things can be taught and some of these things are just like finding the right fit. You know, like the Joe Budden podcast is a hard one. I was a massive Joe Budden fan back in the day, like huge Joe Budden fan coming up. Me and Lowe, we used to joke that we were like the presidents of the Joe Budden fan club. Like his first album, Mood Music mixtapes were like my shit, you
Oh,
know. But he says who he is all the time. You know, he's an addict that has addict personality traits. You know, like whether you're continuing to be an addict or you just have those traits that are deeply like there that you haven't worked at properly and you haven't developed. Like he's went through a traumatic childhood, went through a traumatic adolescence, and like he hasn't done the work in a lot of spaces, and you see that in how he deals with his problems.
mm-hmm.
You know, is that he's like has a lot of work to do. He's one of the most intelligent, brilliant fucking minds in the industry, but he also has a lot of trauma that informs his decisions,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when it shouldn't inform his decisions. And so again, I think that there's sometimes you just have to recognize who you're in a relationship with, you know, and does this make sense or does it not make sense? So, you
Okay,
know.
dope answer. Another question I have for you, right? And like you said, you get about 800 people that usually apply for the remix project, right? And one thing I realized when it comes to gun violence, it's usually like a different block or different hood that have an issue with each other's block or something happened in the past 10 years ago and it kept this problem going that never stopped, right? So so have you guys ever done any outreach to different neighborhoods that you feel like that are really beefing with each other, such as like Rexdale and Driftwood, that's been going on gun violence for a while now? Like, has there been any outreach going into these communities to help, like, elevate these young kids? Because I feel like there's a lot of young artists from these cities, especially Jen and Finch. Jen and Finch breed a lot of dope artists, but I don't feel like there's any help and support going to that community.
I mean, we've definitely had young people from that community in the program.
Yeah,
I would say this. I would say that there's certain things that we're equipped to do and there's certain things that we're not.
yeah,
What a byproduct of Remix has been that I think has been really important is that it's opened up lines of communication between communities that didn't have lines of communication.
mm-hmm.
It's developed relationships between communities that where individuals didn't actually know each other, but now they know each other. Some of them do,
Yeah,
right? And so it's a fine line. Like we definitely in our interview process would figure out like who's from where and who's into it. And we would have certain rounds where it's like more heavily this community, and then another round where it's more heavily that community, and we wouldn't on purpose would not put everyone together.
Mhm.
Or we would, if we had people from different warring communities in the program at the same time, we would schedule their days on different days, and then we would slowly introduce the idea of them being in the same space together.
Oh wow.
um, and we would be very upfront with it. Like we even in the interview process to get into the program, we'd be like, yo, what's like, I'm asking you this for you, not for me, but like, I don't want to put you in a fucked up position. I don't want to put you in the room with the wrong person. Like,
Right.
you don't have to give me specifics, but I just need to know, like, are you good right now? Like,
Wow.
is
Deep.
it like, if you don't want, like, if you're gonna skip a part of the city, where are you gonna skip? Like, like again,
Yeah.
I don't need
Yeah. Yeah.
specifics because I don't need to know. That's not my life. I'm not a part of that shit. I don't want to be a part of that shit, but I do want to make sure that you're safe,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, and then what we would do is, again, we would slowly introduce shit to people. We'd slowly like play music for each other, introduce an idea. There'd be a workshop where people would come together. It'd be in daylight in a public space. And eventually, like, again, like different lines of communication would open.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like a big saving grace, but it would definitely like allow for a phone call where there wouldn't be a phone call before. Where it'd be like, yo, what the fuck is wrong with your man? Versus like just riding out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that that was really powerful, and that was happening for a while. But you know, after a certain amount of things happen, it's very difficult to call it a truce.
Mhm.
Like it's like there's so much emotion involved. Like I always try to approach those conversations from a very practical space where I'm talking to people and I say, look, you're trying to be an artist, or you're trying to be a manager, or you're trying to have this clothing line. Like a big part, like Canada is 30, whatever, it's 40 million people. We're the population of California.
Mhm.
Like the reality is, if you're going to be an artist that's successful, that really does this, you need to travel. You need
Mhm.
to cross the border. You catch a case, you can't cross the border. So I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but I am going to tell you that if you stay here, you make that decision, whether it's to sell weight or whether it's to fucking ride out on someone and answer back something or whatever, like you're making that decision that not only affects that moment, but affects the next 10, 15 years. And it affects your life. It affects your career in a different way, So to me, um, it was always about approaching the conversation from a place where, again, where people are at. Because I could tell you all day, like, say no to drugs. You're gonna be like, cool, pay my rent. You know
Facts.
what I mean? So that's why it was get money, make change with us. And it was like, well, what does that mean? How does that happen? And then so we'd start a conversation about like how you can generate income through your business and how do we grow that? And then how do you invest in yourself? And how do you take certain losses in the short term because you're going towards the long term?
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult conversation to have. I mean, obviously there's no easy answer, but
Yeah.
I do think that communication is a large part of it. And
Yeah.
I also think that identity is a large part of it. I
Mhm.
think that people need to see themselves as something more than a shooter, as something more than like like you know someone in the streets. Like
Uh,
there's I respect people's time. I respect the time that people did.
Yeah.
you know I respect the realities that people have had to navigate and what that means for their character and how strong they are for navigating certain shit. But there's a certain point where you have to decide like who you're going to be for your life, who you're going to be for your legacy. And if that question or that decision is someone other than a gangster, well then you need to stop being in the streets. And that's just the reality. And that's the conversation I have with people I care about, like is just like, if this is going to be your legacy, then let this be your legacy. Let this be your life now, because your legacy starts now. Your legacy starts literally in this moment, and you have to make that decision. Who am I going to be? And if it's going to be in the streets, then be in the streets. Do what you got to do. There's been people that have straight up told me, like, yeah, I hear you. I love you, but I love this shit. And it's like, bro, there's nothing I can tell you then. But if you've been through enough shit at this point, you've gone through some losses, you've lost some friends, you've gone through some backstabbing shit, because the streets is all full of that. It's not like we're all best friends in high school and we're going to be loyal to the end. Like, shit's a fairy tale, bro. Like, you get to a certain age, you realize the streets are bullshit. You don't want that for your little brother, your little cousin. You don't
Facts.
want that for your own life. Like, it's
Facts.
stress and death. And so, like, you get to a certain place and you decide who you're going to be. Well, then you have to live up to that, and that's a very hard thing to do, because now you have to say no to people. Now you have to say no to people who are looking at you for things, and you have to literally make a decision to change. That is going to be a very difficult decision, but if you're going to be the person that you think you are, that you believe yourself to be, that you want to be, then you have to make that decision. You got to live that decision. Mhm.
Facts. You definitely right about that. And one thing I noticed, that Director X been trying to like push is this mental health, mindfulness, meditations. Well, how do you feel like mental health is like something that people don't talk about? Like, you feel me? I feel like a lot of these kids. That's why I put out my book, but a lot of kids don't read books. So, but I put it out just it's there. But
Yeah.
when I realized a lot of people don't talk about the mental health, the trauma that they've been through, the little cousins that got shot when they were 10. This anger they've been carrying around for so long. How come? Do you offer things like that when it comes to the remix project?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely have conversations, and I'll get to, I see some of the questions in the chat, and I'll jump in a second around the COVID and other things as well. But again, like I said earlier, like, we recognize, one, that we're not licensed therapists,
Yeah.
but we also know that we come from certain situations. We've been through certain situations. We've taken a lot of losses that have taught us a lot of lessons, and we can share those conversations, and we can share the wisdom that we've earned. And we recognize that, like I said before, like, you can't be the best graphic designer if you are struggling, with so much anger, and you're going out there just ready to fight all the time, and just drinking the pain away and getting fucked up, and like, you know, just like doing whatever you can do to forget.
Yeah.
We know that, like, you can't, if you're dealing with a bunch of trauma, like I said, you focused on being the best producer, because you're caught up in yourself and in your space. But I do also think, on the flip side, that creating art is a therapy unto itself, and that being able to express and being able to create, whether that be in visually, audio, whatever, is a form of therapy. And we use that as the opening to a larger conversation. Like, we would talk to people all the time. We'd be like, look, bro, that song you just said you killed like 17 people, and I know the murder rate wasn't like that last month. So, like, what are you going through right now? Like, what are you really dealing with? Like, what's, you good? Like, and we would have those conversations. We would use the art, and also the trust that we've been building through that space, to open up to a larger conversation. Because to have a real conversation around mental health takes trust.
Yeah.
It takes respect,
Yep.
and people need to respect you, your opinion, and need to trust you, that with some vulnerable shit. And that just doesn't happen on your first, second, third meeting. So, like, I think with Remix, it was an un and is like a place where its unofficial focus is on mental health, and also just well-being on a 360-degree level, whether it's like where you live, whether it's in terms of like housing situation, or whether it's food, and food security, or whether it's like the mental health aspect, or what have you. It's recognizing that, like, we're really helping people to hopefully become the best version of themselves, and so that way their art can be the best version. um,
Hey, dope.
so yeah, that's how I look at it. Is like using the program and the space to really, again, focus on a deep dive on the individual, so that way we can see them thrive, in their art and in their specific spaces.
It sounds good. So I'm about to grab one question from the chat right now. Somebody from Malachi, he said, "Are you open to help independent artists like consultation calls and music submissions?"
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do that all the time. I will say that, you know, my time is crazy right now, and it's definitely not like the heart. It's just, I just, between my son and I have two businesses. I have an independent record label called Public Records that we operate, and I have a management company where we manage producers and recording artists, as well as do some consulting. And so between, running those two businesses, which are pretty all encompassing, and I remain on the board of directors at Remix, so my board responsibilities and whatever, I definitely don't have a ton of time, but I do try to carve out time to connect with people. So it might not be like 5 conversations, but I'll have 1 or 2, and then my DMs are open. I'll be DMing with people. I'll be texting with people. I always say, just give me a second. I might take a minute to get back to you, but I will get back to you. And if I don't, send me a second follow up, and then I will for sure. So I'm open. I would say, based on this here, I'm just going to put my email in the chat, and then it's .ca, not .com. And then you can also, DM me on Instagram. I'll check those for the next day or two. I do kind of ignore a lot of the ones that I don't know someone, but based on this conversation, like for the next day or two, if you're like, hey, I was in the Keep Six thing and this is whatever. I mean, sorry, up next. Sorry. Thinking about my next guy that I have to get back to. But if you're I was in the up next conversation, whatever, then cool, I'll follow up, because again, I really appreciate what Up Next is all about, what Up Next stands for. And how you continue to like open doors for people and be a platform for people. So based on that, I'll make sure that I create some space from this conversation to at least do some sort of follow up. Like I'll listen to music, I'll give some notes. If there's someone that's looking at something outside of music, but related, like street fashion or videography or photography or management or promotions, like I'm happy to have a conversation there as well. And that could be maybe a phone call or something like that. I think on the music side, it's really just more like listening and giving notes.
That's love.
Whatever, but yeah, I'm happy to do that. Those are my contacts there. Gavin at the remixproject.ca, at Gavatista across social platforms. I'm trying to stay off Twitter a bit just because it's bad for my mental health. To be honest, it's like
all these social medias are bad for my fault.
They're all bad, but like Twitter is like, because I've curated it a certain way, it's just angry all the time. And it's like I could recurate it a different way, but I also learn so much from the people that I follow.
Yeah.
But it's also like it takes a lot out of me, because I'm just open energy wise. I'm super open, and I feel people's energy, and I feel the anger and the frustration, and I get it. And it's overwhelming. So I've been on Instagram a bit more, because it's like curated differently in terms of how who I follow and all that shit. But yeah, hit me up in those spaces, and I'll definitely try to give some feedback. Again, I may take a second. It may take 1 or 2 DMs or 1 or 2 emails instead of just the first one, but please don't be discouraged by that. And again, just know that it's because I'm balancing a lot of shit right now. And it's not like that I'm like, fuck this person. Like, I don't know you, so I'm not going to say fuck this. I have no reason to not check for you, or to be like, nah, forget this person. Like, I have nothing against you. There's no conspiracy here. It's literally just me trying to balance my life.
Yeah, that's love, man. I appreciate your time coming on the show, right? So I'm not gonna hold you for too long. I
think baby's asleep anyways, so we're good.
I got a couple more questions for you, right? So a couple more questions I have written down, right? So what
is the? There was a COVID question. Is there any ways around that with COVID? Kind of hard to travel at the moment in terms of when we were talking earlier. About like touring and all that type of thing. Obviously, well, 2 things I'll say. One is the world is starting to open back up. As Canadians, we can go to the States. It's just Americans that can't come to Canada. And that's fine, because they don't need to for their living. But we do need to go down there in a lot of instances. Like, depending on the style of music you make, you can do okay up here. Like, you can do okay, but you've got to eventually cross over. But the only time you're going to cross over is when there's a demand, or if you're going down to create. If you're going down to create for sessions and whatever, then of course, absolutely. Like, I have a producer we manage who's in LA right now. He's been in LA for the last month and a half. And he flew out there. One of my business partners uh, has been in LA for like 2 months, and as soon as he got there, they just pretty much gave him a COVID shot.
Oh shit.
And anyone can get it in America at this point. Like they don't, you don't even have to be American. But other people have gone down and don't have their COVID shots and are still fine to travel. They're still fine to move around. It's up to you, what you want to do. There's definitely a lot of sessions that, we've been trying to book where people are like, do you have your shot? And then they'd be more open to do it if you did. But that doesn't mean that's how everybody is. So again, it's up to you. It's your body. But knowing that these are some of the things that people are thinking about. But you can travel, like you can move around right now. It just, why are you moving around? And what is your plan? What is your purpose? Right. And so like it doesn't mean that you have to have a tour lined up, but it's like figure out what you're going to do, use the internet to create as many opportunities as you can,
Yep.
and then go there and follow up. Because
Yep.
again, nothing beats being in the room.
Facts.
You can send beats to someone all day, but once you're actually in the session with someone, then music gets done.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to get them excited to be in the room with you or to let you in the room in the first place. So you're going to have to send packs. You're going to start a relationship online. You're going to start DMing people, talking to people, send them a couple joints. So they're like, oh, this shit's fire. Like maybe they try and demo out some shit and then be like, look, I'm going to come to LA or I'm going to come to Houston or wherever you are for a week and we're going to work. Like, can we work? Blah, blah, blah. And if that's the case, then that's when it's time to go. But until then, you're not just going to go sit in your Airbnb and make beats out there in your Airbnb. I've seen so many people do that, and it's just like
Waste of time.
it's a waste of time, waste of money. And you're not going to tour somewhere where there's no audience. So, what are you doing to build the audience in that space? Like, are you doing targeted ad campaigns? Like, I know that's something that Up Next is really great at, is like building out targeted ad campaigns, building out like marketing campaigns that can really help you like build a grassroots support in different spaces. And so if you're like, look, I want to target, you know, wherever it is, like the Midwest, then okay, cool. I'd like start targeting Instagram ads, start targeting Spotify ads, start targeting your Google ads, your Facebook ads into these spaces, specifically aiming at those spaces. And then from there, you start seeing the analytics back of who's watching, who's listening, who's streaming, and then you can make an educated decision about when it's time to go, right? So
Dope, dope,
um,
dope.
but yeah, like Swish styles for sure. Like you need to market your music into the States and keep building the demand is basically it. And it's by doing that, again, I think it's like two things. It's one is collaborating with people out there, and it doesn't have to be huge name artists. It's like figuring out who's someone that fits your sound and who's dope, and building with other people that are on your level in those spaces. And then, because even if it's someone that just has like whatever it is, 10,000 streams in that marketplace, that's 10,000 people that probably aren't listening to your music, or maybe 5,000 people listen twice, whatever it is. But like, there's an audience there that you start to grow, and it starts organically, and then you do the targeted ad buys. You actually like say, okay, I'm going to go this age group to this age group, male or female, this city, this location. You're going to spend, whatever it is, $50 on an Instagram ad, $200 on this, $300 on that. And you build out a whole campaign that's going to be focused there, and you start to build incrementally, right? Step by step, focused on doing collaborations with people in the marketplace, and then also pushing ad buys in those market spaces, and then focus on that to take over. And I think that what you don't want to do is try to do that too much in New York, LA, and Atlanta. I think you want to partner with people out there as much as you can, do collaborations.
Facts.
But if you can start to build with people that are like popping in the Midwest, like in Chicago's still kind of hard, but Chicago but like find those artists in Memphis that are coming up, find those artists in Texas that are coming up,
Yeah.
find those artists in those kind of market spaces where it's not as saturated, where not everybody and their family member is buying ads to saturate that space. Then you can start to build a wave that's going to be your story to then get to that market space, right? So like if you're able to build a wave in Texas, like in Houston and Dallas, and all these people are starting to listen to your music, then it helps you that much further when you're going back to pitching to Spotify to get into American playlists, right? and then you can try to move over to Atlanta. But trying to break into Atlanta, it's like everybody in the South is already going to Atlanta, and
Mhm.
then you're going to come from somewhere else to go down there. Like, it's just, you're cutting through a lot of noise, and it could work for you, and it could be dope because there's so much talent there and there's a system there and what have you. But I feel like a smart strategy is to focus on places like North Carolina that has a really cool bubbling scene that you've seen some great artists come out of, places like Memphis,
Oh,
places like Houston that you've seen artists come out, that have had that are having real success at the moment, but aren't oversaturated in terms of everybody trying to go there. And then partnering with artists and producers from those spaces, because those folks are trying to get out and their city's starting to have a bit of a moment. So there's a cachet there, there's a cool aspect of it.
mhm.
And you can build a relationship with them because they're trying to get out too, and they want to work with someone from Toronto because Toronto has that cool spotlight on it. And
Uh,
then you can again organically start to show that you've got fan bases emerging in different markets. And then when it's time to to push your next single and you're pitching it to Spotify through your distributor or whatever, you can say like, we've got this support here. I'm partnered with I've worked with a producer from here, whatever, because to get on an American playlist a lot of times, or a UK playlist, they're like, how is this relevant to out here? Like, yeah, the song's great, but I got 1,000 great songs from someone in my backyard and I should be programming them. They're going to be, cheesed if I don't. So if I put on some kid from Toronto, why is this relevant? Oh, well, it's relevant because the producer of the record's from there. Oh, that's cool. Or there's a collab with an artist from there. Oh, okay, cool. Now it's relevant to my marketplace,
okay.
right? And so again, if you have ad buys and you're like, and I'm spending ad money on Spotify ads for your market, and I'm spending targeted IG ads and whatever, and now there's all of a sudden there's a reason for that distributor to be pitching it to the playlists in those marketplaces outside of Canada, and you're not just trying to get on Northern Bars, and New Music Fridays, which are kind of like your only places for rap up here in Toronto, on Spotify or Apple Music with like the New Toronto and the Plug or whatever, which are really all of those that I just said are really great playlists and they're amazing. But if you're trying to get into international spaces, you have to give those editors a reason, right?
Okay, dope gems. I hope you guys are taking some notes because I didn't expect this guy to drop all these informations. That shit you gotta pay for it. You guys getting this shit for free.
No worries, man.
Yeah,
I
real,
mean, these are all things that I've been learning as I go along the
yeah,
way,
real
and
shit.
just kind of like, wasting a lot of money on like PR, and
Facts.
like,
You shit on your own.
yeah, it should not, like, I've spent so much money on publicists in America, and it just has not worked for me, like, and what I should have been doing was paying for a feature or paying for a
Facts.
producer from those spaces or paying
Facts.
for targeted ads in those spaces.
Facts. Facts.
Um, instead of just trying to get someone to put me in complex that someone's just going to scroll past if they even see the story, even if I do get in there. So I think like that's, if I could spend that money again, I would spend it through collaborations, and I would spend
Big fact.
because, yeah, then people are more invested in seeing it win. And I would spend it in like very targeted spaces where not everybody else is trying to get to. And then I would build my story to be that cool kid from Toronto who's connected to Memphis, who's connected to Houston, and now is trying to do X, Y, Z, and
That's dope. That's the dope.
you know,
That's a dope idea for sure. That's a dope idea. One thing I realize these days when it comes to music, especially independent artists, I find out a lot of artists trying to make it in the industry so fast without even building that foundation. A lot of them trying to get signed to labels. They think it's the way out. They think it's the way to make it big and get rich. But not understanding, even if you do sign to a label, it doesn't mean anything. If you don't got a hit record, you don't got a fan base. They really can't do nothing for you if you didn't build that foundation and actually connect with people. So what's your take with artists trying to get signed right away and not actually build their own brand and trying to curate their own stuff?
um, I think, you know, um, I think it's super important. Sorry, I'm just, again, management company, and one of the artists I work with just did something stupid, and God bless them. It's no one that anybody on here would know. But anyways, I Just need to finish dealing with this and make sure that that gets sorted out. There we go. Okay. Um, so in terms of building your own brand, I think it's incredibly important. Like I said, there are still some deals that happen based on talent alone,
Yeah.
but they are very few and far between. I think that, for the most part, people want to see, if they're going to invest in you, they want to see something moving already. And
Facts.
then being like, if I add fuel to the fire, then this could turn huge,
Yeah.
right? But they want to see movement already, and then being like, okay, I can just see this, and then how do I augment it, how do I blow it up further because it's already starting to happen in this space, versus just taking something straight from scratch and blowing it up. And I think that, in terms of building your brand as well, like there's two brands that you're building in a lot of instances. There's your music brand in terms of who you are as an artist, and then there's an identity next to that that people can then be a part of, right? Because as an artist, people want to be like you, but how do they feel like you? And what I mean by that is like, what are they putting on their back that makes them feel like they're a part of something now, right? So OVO clothing, like Maxo Cream out of Houston has his Persona clothing, which is doing really well out there. Like there's a brand that you're selling, that your merch, that is also a brand, that's an identity, Dream Chasers, whatever. Like people want, again, like on Dream Chasers, people want to be like Meek Mill. Okay, cool. Well, but what can they buy into? They can't be like, I'm Meek Mill. They can say, I'm a Dream Chaser,
Facts.
right? Like they can say, I'm a part of that, or I subscribe to that, or I feel like, whatever. So I think what you're looking to do is, your music is going to make people excited and interested in something. And then the most successful brands are things that people feel like they're buying into and becoming a part of, and that you're welcoming people into something. That's why you've seen over the years with all the trends on social media with people calling their fans stuff like barbs, with Nicki Minaj or whatever. And it's helping to give an identity to people that are looking for identity, right? Because identity is the most powerful thing in the world, like it really is. Like being able to project an idea of something that other people buy into, then it makes those people treat you differently,
Yeah.
right? So who are you? What is your identity? What are you pushing? Who is this? How is it's going to affect the way that the world deals with you, right? And so we're constantly, you know, sorting through our identity, figuring out who we are. And as young people, you're kind of trying on different shit and seeing what fits and what doesn't fit. And you're going through stuff. And we want to be a part of something. Like human beings are tribal in nature. That is who we are. We are a tribal animal, you know? So, how do you welcome people into your community, into your brand, into your tribe, into that? And that's what you're kind of doing, I think, when you're building a successful brand in the culture space, because
Mm-hmm.
people are buying into your lifestyle, they're buying into what you talk about, they're buying into your music, which is all of those things, right? And then how do they get to feel a part of it, and how are you engaging with the audience? And so, merchandise is a part of that, and then creating experiences for people are a part of that, um, and then growing it out from there. I think that you also have to recognize that music is like the tip of the spear in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things, um, but it's not the thing that's going to generate you the most money.
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, it's going to lead to the things that will, and or byproducts of it will. Like touring will make you a bunch of money. God willing, your publishing might make you some money one day. Um, but streaming and all that stuff, like it's not making you a ton of money. You look at, I look at groups like there's a crew, an underground hip hop crew out here called Gold Era. And they're like some OG cats that make that kind of classic boom bap music. And their streaming numbers are not impressive, to be honest. But they make 300 vinyl, and they sell it to collectors at $40 a pop,
Oh,
and they're making $12,000,
wow.
right? Now, streaming, you have to have 2.5 million spins to get $12,000. So instead of doing 2.5 million streams, they sold 300 pieces of vinyl. So again, it's like, what's the goal here? If the goal is to be simply popular, then I get it. That's cool. Like, there's nothing wrong with that goal. But if the goal, and then you chase that in as many ways and spaces as you can, but you really have to think about, well, how am I paying bills on my way to being this superstar, or how do I pay bills on a way to live my passion, right? And so if you're able to tap into those spaces, if you make the type of music that people like, R&B music on vinyl, certain rap records on vinyl, you do some cool art, you do some cool shit, you have a dedicated fan base that's going to support you, like, that's a really interesting business model to me. Then you start doing little packages where you're doing vinyl and t-shirt, or vinyl, a t-shirt, and a hat or whatever, and all these things have markups. And now you're starting to make some real money, and you're able to pay rent, for a few months. You're able to do invest back into your craft. You're paying your phone bill, you're paying your internet, you're paying your groceries, like all these things that you really need to do to focus back into your art. you know um so really looking at that, like being like, okay, cool, I'm out here trying to compete against everybody in the world to get streams, you know, but how am I making money? And you still got to focus on the streams because they're still part of the game, but how am I making money? And your brand is what's going to allow you to do that, by being able to do cool shit, whether that's partnering with like a restaurant to do a pop-up, whether that's doing the clothing with stuff, but could be an event, that you're putting together. Like the Love Renaissance guys, LVRN, which has become one of the biggest like labels in the world at this point, for R&B and starting to get into rap music. Summer Walker and Black and Dram, who's now Shelly.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, all them. They started as nightclub promoters, right? Like they started as nightclub promoters that were able to bring the culture together, and they
Yeah.
were able to bring a real audience who actually supported music and loved music and paid for tickets and paid for merch items. And that's how they developed their cachet and their ability to like put people in a room in a concert and whatever. And so they translated from being nightclub promoters. They started interning at labels, they started doing the work for free or for super cheap, and then learning the game or whatever. But they never moved away from the basic principles of what brought them money, which was getting people in a room and creating a lifestyle experience that someone's going to love, have a great time, talk about with their friends,
Mhm.
and share. And now they're just doing it to share music and to promote their artists, but they're still doing great events, bringing people together, selling hard tickets, making their money, and then the streaming is the gravy on top, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's something that you really got to think about, when you're moving into this industry, is just kind of like, well, where is the money?
Mhm.
Because it's not in streaming. Like, not, what is it? 1 million streams is $5,000. So, there's a living there for sure. People are making 5 million streams. Like, that's great. Like, it's $25,000. Like, you've got other things to pay off or whatever, but like you're doing something there. But if you're trying to, that's, you can't live off of that for a year. You can't live off. So if you can't live off 5 million streams for a year, and we're fighting for 500,000 streams, like, how are you going to bring in money that allows you to pursue your passion? And I think, by having these different brand extensions, by bringing people together for events, by doing the merch stuff, like all that, that's going to be how you survive, as well as going to be a marketing and promotion tool for you, to continue to build up the music aspect of it in the music career.
That's dope, 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 dope. You definitely right about that. Every artist that I work with, I find out a lot of artists that a couple artists that I work with, they kind of like views hungry, they streams hungry. When I tell them the best thing to do is kind of like build the relationship and provide value, create a website where you can sell merch, where you can sell different services. That way, even if people come to your page and click the link in the bio, they could subscribe to your mailing list. You know what I mean? That way, if you drop a song, you could email all these 500 people, and every time you drop a song, you attach a shirt to it. You be like, hey, I have a merch bundle. It's better to make $10 of a song than to like wait a million streams just to get $1. You know what I mean? Like, I be trying to tell them is sometimes it's good to have that one product that you could sell to make a profit of. But I feel like the way artists work these days, they compare themselves to a lot to other artists they see on Instagram that are in LA, Miami, driving the Lambos, driving the Bentley. But when it's all this facade, they all rented. They don't own these things. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
what
for
you
sure.
do?
Or it's money from the streets, just like it is up here,
Yeah,
and that shit doesn't end well in the long term. And we see it doesn't end well in the States, and it doesn't end well up here. Like
you're right. You're definitely right. So all you said is things I've been preaching a lot to every artist that I work with. But I find that that message goes to one ear, it goes out to the other. They're all going after the streams when it's like that's like the hardest thing to get when it's easy to even sell a shirt. It's easy to sell a lifestyle shirt, lifestyle brand where people feel like it's cool to wear that shirt. You don't even have to put your name on the shirt, but you can make it cool like the Yeezys. You can make it cool like you know what I mean. You can make a
yeah,
cool
no, for
shirt.
sure. And that's I think like one thing that's challenging
Yeah,
up here with the merch game
yeah,
for a lot of artists, especially artists, is that a lot of artists are in the streets or affiliated with the streets.
facts.
And so people are kind of like outside the city, people will buy your shit. And that's what's important. And that's super important is just figuring out where can you sell it. Like you can sell your shit in Hamilton. These kids are going to go crazy for it in Brantford because they're all online. They're all on Up Next. They're all on these other brand like pages, seeing what's good and learning the politics, and they want to support their shit. People in the city don't want to wear that shit.
Nah, I ain't wearing that
I'm not trying to be
shit. You ain't
downtown and
gonna catch
somebody pays
me.
me for my merch. Like,
Nah, bro. You ain't gonna
fuck
catch me at
that.
the mall wearing.
I
Nah, I
already
don't
get it
even know
enough.
these guys, bro. I'm just wearing the shirt.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to show love. I'm just trying to support. Like, you know what I mean?
I'd buy yours too, bro. Like,
That's
cool.
facts.
Like, I'm not
That's why
affiliated, but
you're
it's
right. That's why if they're gonna do these type of brands, it's good to not attach whatever they're
yeah, like don't make
affiliated with.
it gang shit.
Don't
Don't
make
don't
gang
try to
shit,
sell
man.
gang shit. Like
Man,
make
you
your brand.
straightforward. That's why I fuck with you. You like a straightforward guy. You don't beat around the bush. You tell him what it is. Yo, bro, don't push that gang shit on that shit. Nobody gonna rock this shit, bro. You want me to get shot? The
Yeah,
fuck?
that's exactly, bro. I say that
Bro.
all the time. Like to my young boy, I'm like, yo, man, like I love you, bro, but like I'm not wearing that shit. Like
Oh,
you got to make something that is going to be again is inclusive,
facts. That's the
right?
word.
Like that's
Inclusive.
what you have to do is you have to figure something that people like. Yeah, again, these kids in the burbs might think it's like uh,
Cool shit.
cool or whatever, and it's exciting, and that there's a certain thing that you can leverage off of that, and it is what it is. Like people are always going to do it. People are wearing fucking uh, like shit from Chicago that is super gang affiliated, and they don't really they don't have to worry about the repercussions up here,
Facts. Even in
right? But
Canada.
when you're looking at building something from the ground up, you're generally looking at building in your community and the community next to you and the
Big
community right
facts.
next to
Big
that.
facts. Big
And
facts.
so again, you have to figure about like, well, what am I setting this person up for? In terms of like what they're putting on their back and the energy that they're moving forward with. And I think that again, like you have to figure out how you separate yourself from some of this stuff and you have to make certain decisions. Like there's a lot of artists that I work with that you know start in a certain place, and over the years they start to recognize like I need to move away from these things. I need to separate myself from this shit because it's the fastest way. Using polys and shit like that is the fastest way to get views, but then
Facts.
there's also a glass ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like, and I think that people are looking too short term, and so they're just like, how do I, basically heat this up, heat this up, heat this up, to get that kind of initial everyone talking about it, it's controversial or whatever. But then you hit a glass ceiling, and that's what people don't realize is they're struggling to get to that like 20,000 followers or something like that, and to get like their name buzzing on a couple pages and whatever, when they don't realize that they're actually sacrificing the larger path to success, because now promoters ain't going to fuck with you. Police are going to call the venue. When you're doing a show, even if you have a promoter doing something, the police are going to call the venue and say, hey, we're Guns and Gangs Task Force. this person is affiliated. You can't do the show unless you hire 5 of us because they're a gang too. So they're going to go out and try and make their money, right? And they're going to say, cool, you got to hire 5 officers now, or else we're shutting your shit down. Like,
Big facts.
or yeah, like this is stuff that we've all lived through, and we've had certain experiences. Like now you can't cross the border, you can't do X, Y, Z. So you basically get to a point where you self-sabotage over that first push.
Hell,
And it's better to take the long road because it might take a little while longer, but you're being able to go that much further, you know?
big facts. Yo, man, you spraying mad gems in this conversation. I didn't expect all that. That we have like a dope ass seminar right now. You guys owe me some money. All you guys are saying here, I'm just fucking with you guys. But yeah, I got about like 3 more questions before I let you go. One thing, I was reading an article about yourself, especially with the public records that you currently have. Uh, Me, I just started an independent label as well. The reason why I started the independent label because I wanted to invest into artists. I feel like, damn, there's a lot of dope artists out here. They don't got that initial investment. Nobody's really pushing them. So let me trying to do something. Artists that I like, I invest in them. But but to me, when it comes to like me as a record label owner, somewhat, right? I don't want to sign these artists for like 5 years, 3 album deals, 10 years. I owe you. I own you for life. You can't go nowhere. This is
Right,
me.
right, right.
You only put music out when I tell you to. I don't. It's kind of somewhat sliverish, somewhat. And I'm not that type of person. I'll license a song or I'll license an album, or we could, if the album does well, we could do a rerun. But like after that, you could do on your own. You could do whatever you want. I'm not. I was trying to teach artists to kind of like retain their ownership and things like that. It's good to license music out and things like that. What's your take on record contracts owning artists for like so long where artists can't get out of these deals
I
and
mean, obviously
yeah,
that's not good. But what I will say is that there is not a hard and fast rule to me when you're starting out. And the reason why I say that is everyone has their own situation, everyone has their own reality that they're dealing with. And the bottom line is that you need capital to really make a dent in this industry.
facts.
And as a business, it makes sense to invest in either things that you own or that you have, if you don't own, you have a long term relationship with.
Hmm.
And, we often hear guys like Meek Mill and, Tory Lanez be like, go independent, be independent, own your masters, be independent. And again, I agree with the message, but the reality is they're speaking from a place where they've already had $3 million pumped into their career.
Facts.
Get them to a place where their fan base is at a spot where they can be independent and be successful. If you don't have a, a, like a bank loan, or you don't have like rich family or someone willing to put it in, like Chance the Rapper is another one. He's always talking about, be independent, blah blah blah. Like his manager is a billionaire,
Hmm.
like literally a billionaire, like he's on the level of like a Rothschild. Like
That's
it's like,
crazy.
yeah,
That's
like
level.
like they can afford to lose $500,000 and it's not gonna hurt.
That's fact.
Like I lose
Pretty much
50.
signed to a label when you think about it like that.
That's so it's like, he doesn't need to do that, but he's also preaching from a place that is not necessarily fair. Like I think you
Facts.
have to look at it where you're like, look, you don't want to get into a place where you owe 7 albums to someone over 15 years.
Peace.
Um, unless like there's a very favorable deal terms in place, but probably there's not going to be, right?
Yeah.
You like, but you might be in a space where you're like, look, I'm willing to do an album plus 2 options somewhere. And, I don't have because I don't have the leverage to get what I want. Like everything in this world, pretty much in business is based on leverage, right? It's based on supply and demand. Um, and if you don't have the demand on a major level, well, there's a ton of supply out there. There's a lot of people making music. There's a lot of people doing their thing. So, what is your leverage? and you have to build your leverage to a certain place where you can, demand the kind of business terms and deals that you want. And sometimes when you're starting out, you got to take deals that are good for you, but are not your goal. That's not where you want to be by album 4, 5, 6, 7. So you're like, okay, I'm willing to do an album plus two options, as long as the deal's like decent. Like it has to be a good deal, otherwise don't take it. There's no point. It's stupid. But like, if there's decent investment coming in, and they're going to help pay for the masters, they're going to help pay for the featured artists that you need, the producers you need, they're going to put a bunch of money into marketing. Like it's still a business. Like it's not like someone's just going to do that for charity.
Facts.
So it's not just giving you money to go be successful. Like that doesn't really exist in the world. Like it
Facts.
maybe here and there, but not really. So what do they get out of it? And so you make a business deal and you say, okay, cool, like I'm willing to give up this much percent, I'm willing to give this much if you're going to put in this in, and from there, again, you have a plan. You buy album number 3, this is your last album with them, and you're going to be at a place where you can turn around and you've built a fan base, you've built an audience to the place where now it makes sense for you to go independent, because now you've got a base that's going to support you, that's going to buy your merch, that's going to come to your shows, because of all that sweat equity that you've put in and the real dollars that the investor has put in to get to that place. So I think that there's moments where it makes sense to do a record deal. It just doesn't necessarily make sense to do like a 7-album deal for 15 years, unless again there's some sort of sliding scale ownership. Because again, everything's negotiable. Like you can negotiate different terms. It's
Yeah.
what's your thing? What I'm doing at this point is I'm doing pretty much licensing deals. So
Facts.
ownership remains with the artist. But what that means is we license the rights to that music for X amount of period of time. And
Facts.
so that means it makes sense for me to invest the money into it because I have the rights to it for X amount of years. Of course, the artist is paid a royalty, and they're definitely paid a better royalty in a licensing deal than they're paid in a major label signing deal. But I don't have the money to put into it that a major label has. So again, there's some trade-offs. But if you believe in what we're doing, there's some investment there. We can do a licensing deal. You're going to get your masters back by the end of the licensing term. So you ultimately own them the whole time. I'm just licensing the use for X amount of years. There's an investment in advance. There's an investment in the recording budget. There's an investment in the marketing. And then we move from there. Or I'm doing like 50-50 joint ventures where we're doing basically what's called a net receipts deal. So in a net receipts deal, in a record contract like a signing or in a licensing deal, you have recoupables, meaning you get your advance, you owe it back through your sales, right? And you have a percentage. So let's say you have, for the sake of argument, 30%, the label has 70. Through your 30%, you're paying back your advance, right? That's not like, it's not like 100, like, $5,000 comes in, let's say $10,000 because my math is terrible. $10,000 comes in. Out of your 30%, you get 3,000, right? That's how you're paying back your advance. You're not paying it back from that 10. So, let's say you take a $20,000 advance, you need to then sell whatever 3 times 7, basically. So you have to pay like $70,000 to pay back that 20. You have to make basically, or make $100,000. No, you have to make $100,000 to pay back that 21,000, basically, right? So all that I'm saying is, there's a different way of like recoupment. In a 50-50 joint venture, everything is being split right down the middle. You have a higher 50% than anything else, but it's called net receipts. So in a net receipts deal, you're basically saying with someone, we're both bringing stuff to the table. I'm bringing the music, maybe some dollars. You're bringing dollars. We're going to do this as a joint partnership. Everything is recoupable. And once everything gets recouped, we're splitting it right down the middle, 50-50. Going back to that licensing, what I didn't finish saying, and I should have, in a licensing in a direct signing, your advance is recoupable But a marketing dollars, promotion dollars, PR dollars, those are non-recoupable dollars, right? So that comes out of the label's 70%. So you might take a $20,000 advance that's recoupable, and the label might put 50,000 in marketing. That comes out of their 70, right? So they're not, it doesn't affect you. Like you, once your first bid is paid back, like you're making your 30% while the label's still paying off their shit.
Wow.
And so it's split that way. But so there's different like reasons why you would do one deal or another. If you really think you got something and you think you're going to have a hit and it's going to go, and you've got a project there, like a 50-50 kind of net receipts deal is great. But if you're still developing your project and it's, it's going to be hit or miss, like you want that label to put as many dollars as possible into your career to get it off the ground. And you don't want to be on the hook for all that. You want the label to be on the hook for that. So you're going to want to do something that puts them on the hook and that you're only worried about the advance. And so you're looking at more like a direct artist signing, where you're looking at a licensing deal to get it off the ground. So, again, it's really just kind of looking at where you're at, what your bargaining power is, what your leverage is, how you're able to, get the most favorable deal for yourself at the table. And ultimately, you need a great entertainment lawyer to be figuring this stuff out with you. And I say with you, not for you, because you have to kind of be the captain of your ship. But you got to be telling them this is what I'm looking for, and they're going to be explaining to you what it work, like how it works and how you can make it happen. There's a couple great entertainment firms in the country. I personally use a guy named Safwan Javid, who I think is really great. Their firm is called TKO Lawyers. There's a young woman who just joined over there. What's her name again? I'm going to put it in the chat. But they're a really great firm. They're one of the partners is a guy named Miro as well. Obala, and it's Taylor Obala Klein or something like that, or TKO. Anyways, I'm just going to put it in the chat in a second. And there's a ton of other firms out there. They're not the only people to use, but I think they do really good work. And again, I think when you're building out a team, you're looking at like a few major players, right? So you're looking at there we go. I just got the website. TOMLlawyers.com. So, and everyone's emails are on there, their phone numbers are on there. You can reach out to them. This is what I'm doing, or whatever. So when you're building a team, your entertainment lawyer is one of your most important parts of your team. Arguably, like it's right up there near the top. Obviously a manager is super important. A booking agent is really important. And then, there's other degrees. So like a music sync and supervisor person is important as well, that I think, is someone that's overlooked oftentimes. And basically like what a music sync and supervisor does is someone who's shopping your music to get into film and television and commercials, right? So they're going out there trying to get your song to play for 5 minutes in the background of, or like 30 seconds in the background of like CSI Miami or some shit. Like, but that brings you, 8,000 US
Jeez.
for 30 seconds. And, it allows you to again invest back into your music, pay your bills, whatever. When we're talking about income in the industry and to allow you to do what you're doing, music supervisors are constantly looking for independent artists to work with, because then they don't have to clear it through the major label, pay the major label fees associated with it, and whatever. So sometimes, they want like a Kanye West track for the Mission Impossible movie or whatever, but 9 times out of 10 for the songs during the movie in the background and stuff like that, or in the TV show or whatever, they don't want to be shelling out that money. They just have like a club scene and the music's like muffled in the background anyways, the characters talking to the other character or whatever. They just need a song that sounds like a club record. They need a song that sounds like an R&B record, or there's a love scene and there's a song playing in the background. um, so there's a couple of really good music sync supervisors out there. um, Obviously Google's your friend. One company that I'll say off the jump is called Public Good. Public Goods. The Greater Goods. The Greater Goods. A guy named Mike Jansen, who's from Toronto actually, but lives in LA full time. And what is the website? The Greater Goods Music Supervision. It's thegreatergoodsco.com. That's it. So
Get some
what
notes.
up pitches is a cool community. Yeah, that's dope. I don't know about them, but I'm gonna do my Googles later for sure. Um, but there's a lot of Toronto people that have had some success through Mike Jansen at the Greater Goods um, there, and like you know, he's been able to build, like with a guy like Rochester, for example. You know, he works with him on spec, where he'll often, not to go too deep into his business at all, but oops, I put that privately by accident. So here, this is to everyone now. So he'll basically, for example, be like, look, we need a club track that speaks about taking off. And, and cool. It's like you make a hook where it's like, I'm taking off, I'm taking off. And it might not be a song that you're trying to put out, but it's a song now that goes in this scene where an airplane's flying off and the characters are going to go do whatever they're going to do. And again, it made you $5,000 to $10,000 US while you're focused on going back to doing what you're fighting for that million streams.
Jeez.
So they do a lot of spec work, which is really cool. And I think that there's a lot of room out there for people to make spec work songs um, that sounds like authentic, because there's like some weirdos out there doing the work right now, and there's so much room to come in and take that scene over. There's another local company called JVC, the Jamvik Group. Let me just see if there's a
I better
website.
take some notes down because I'm taking notes.
Um, the Jamvik. Jamvik Group. Let's see the LinkedIn. It's Jamal Vickers, who I actually work with, full disclosure. But I don't have any stake in his business. And he's someone. Holy shit, he's got a big link tree. Oh, there it is. So, I don't know if recordings share the comments. It's a good question.
Yeah, I'm taking a lot of notes, so I'm gonna share it with you guys. Everybody that came in here, I'm gonna share it with you guys because I got
Like I
everybody's
don't like
email.
yeah, like I know like our conversation will be up and you'll hear me say these names again, but I don't know if the comments will come, the chat will come up in a
It
recording.
was saved. The chat is saved. The chat.
Okay.
That's what I like about Zoom. It save you a voice for the podcast, and also save you the video to post on YouTube, and also save you the chat if you want to like send an email or anything like that.
Right.
Right? That's really dope about Zoom. But yeah, thank you very much for all the information that you shared. I know you're a busy man. I got two more questions for you before I let you go, right? So
Okay.
one question I wanted to ask you, right? What advice would you want to share with everyone on how to keep going and staying positive, especially to these days right now? We're going through COVID. A lot of people, mental health is down. People like not chasing their dreams as much that they used to. So what's been helping you to stay positive to keep going?
Um, I honestly, I as an exercise, I literally count my blessings. Um, and maybe not like one, this, two, this, but I actively, over the last couple months, especially just because like COVID's been so tough on a lot of levels. Like, I've been blessed to get through it, without losing anyone. Thank God. I should knock on wood because it's not over yet, but it's been tough. Like the music industry has been really hard. Like our business has been built, not I've, but our business has been built off of community in a lot of ways and by bringing people together. Like we do events, we partner with brands as well. As one of the ways that we make money is like we'll partner with brands and do like a cool house party for Canadian Music Week with Jameson, and Jameson will give us some money and we'll do a cool thing, whatever. But all that's been locked off. Like a large part of yeah, Dougie shutting down live stream concerts has also been insane. Like he took the last thing we had.
Crazy.
Um,
Insane.
so like, you know, it's been tough. Like all of our live touring, we had some artists that were touring artists, and we've lost all that income. The merch income's pretty much gone with that, and our special events and all that. But also in terms of how I break artists, like I do investment in marketing in the digital space and all that, but I'm often again doing these events, these house parties, these different things that bring tastemakers together, that bring people together, that get to experience a lived experience, right? Like, music is the soundtrack to our lives, and our lives have been put on hold. And
Facts.
so it's been this really weird space to operate from. And so I've lost a ton of income over this last year and change. Um, and I'm now helping others navigate their situation, which is just as bad, if not worse, in a lot of instances of the artists we manage and the producers we manage, because everything's ground to a halt on so many levels. And so, it's been super tough on the mental. So I literally just started like counting the blessings, like in a positive way, and just being like, you know, this food is amazing. like, my son is
Jerk
hilarious.
chicken.
Yeah, like those type of things. Like, the sun feels amazing. Acknowledging those things, like there's so much power in acknowledgement. And our we're beings that thrive off of energy, and it's like not even on some like super like hippie shit, but just literally energy affects us, right? And positive energy, negative energy, like you feel it, right? And so, I see someone saying they've been doing daily affirmations to cope with stress. I think that's brilliant. Like, I think that's exactly it. Like, it's literally choosing positive, and it's a very hard choice to make sometimes. And
Facts.
I don't say that lightly, but it is still a choice in a lot of instances. And acknowledging those things that are great and kind of trying to surf by the bullshit, like I definitely want to, like, you want to deal with negative traumas or negative things that are in your life. You have to deal with them and then get past them, but it's not a straight line. And I think that, people talk about like overcoming like a trauma or something as if it's like an event as opposed to a process.
Hmm.
um, it's not like you just like flick a light switch and you've made it past.
Yep.
But you might make it past that day, and then the next day it got a little easier, and the next day got a little easier, and then it got fucking hard again. But then it got easier, and then it got easier. Like it's not just like a one thing. Like it goes like this sometimes, and it's acknowledging that and recognizing that as a reality, and that you're not failing if you feel like shit some days, even though you were getting better just a few days before that.
Facts.
But I think that it is important to then take those positive affirmations, take those kind of just little things that make you feel good, whether it's a song, whether it's a TV show, whether it's food, whether it's just the sun beating down, now that we finally got some good weather out here, like those things, and just acknowledging that, like, man, this tastes great, man, this feels great. Like
Facts.
those things are super important. And it's something that I've been practicing myself.
Dope, 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 dope. I love that energy. So moving forward, right? What can we expect from you? I know you got the label that you pushing right now, and you also got the management. And so, what can we expect from you? What's next for Gavin Sheppard? Like, what is the new thing you're pushing out now?
Yeah, I mean, God willing, I know my partner wants us to just drop everything and move to a different country and start like a green school or something. But uh, we'll see how it all plays out. For me, it's just a constant evolution. I think obviously there's a few things going on in terms of the music side of things, and I want people to go check out Public Records. It's on Public Records is our website, or the Instagram. I changed it as just Public Records _ Inc. And the management side is not as important. It's called Quiet as Kept, and that's what it is. Like there's a website, there's a IG, but you don't really need to know about us. You need to know about the artists. That's why we're Quiet as Kept. We're in the background. We're just doing the work we need to do. Let the artists be famous. But the label side, it's good for you to know, so that way you can know about the artists we're putting out, or we're doing a lot of distribution work with some people that I'm really excited about. I'm trying to like help, uplift other labels and other movements and stuff coming out of the city by doing the distribution side and trying to give people the best foot forward. So, the music thing is going to be a constant in my life, but to me it's just an evolution of wanting to help people and wanting to and being around storytellers.
Mhm.
So, that's kind of where my life has always been, and what interests me is like I love stories. And I think stories are what moves humanity. What brings us together, and it what's help it, they're what helps us learn, helps us pass on information, whether that be like very specific information or whether that be more about like the blueprint of emotions and how to deal and how to cope with them. We learn through stories. And so whether that's film and television, whether that's writing, graphic novels, whether that's, books, and then of course music, like storytelling and learning people's stories and then helping people that I think are exciting and that I think are inspiring and just wanting to share stories and share art, is where you're going to find me. So that's what's next for me, is just constantly like helping storytellers tell stories that I think are important.
That's facts. And I appreciate that. We about to tell a story with this podcast. Like I appreciate your time. We just went over like 2 hours. I didn't expect for us to go over two
Yeah,
hours.
I'm sure.
I try to keep it at 1 hour, but like, damn, you were dropping shit. I like, yo, let me let this guy talk. This guy, I'm not gonna interrupt this guy.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody sticking with us out here as well.
Yeah, facts. I appreciate everybody that's still in here. You know what I mean, taking the time to listen. You guys could have been outside eating some ice cream. I appreciate you guys coming to the Zoom thing. That's what we have to do nowadays. So thank you very much for tuning in to the A&R for the Streets podcast.
Yeah.
This was
If you're up next,
Gavin. Get your up next merch.
up
This is
next.
Gavin Sheppard. Make sure you guys follow him. This guy's one of the legends in the city that I've been following because I don't try to tap in with everybody. You feel me? That's one guy I like to tap in with people that are like extraordinary, people that need documentaries about themselves, a movie. They need to be a movie about the Remix Project. They need to be a documentary about this guy. This guy needs to be in the Hall of Fame of the creatives in the city.
Maybe
So
after I'm done, otherwise it's gonna fuck me up. Too many details.
yeah, I appreciate it,
But
man. I
thank you, man. I
appreciate your
appreciate
time,
the
man. Have
platform,
a
and
great night, all right?
yeah, likewise, man. I appreciate the platform. I appreciate what you're doing for people in the city, man. So
Facts,
thank you as
facts,
well.
facts. Yo,
Appreciate
you inspired me, man. Remix Project inspired me. It's because I couldn't get in. That's the reason why I started my own shit. I like, damn, I'm too old for this shit. All
it. I love it. That's awesome, man. Well, it's great to
right,
see what
man.
you're doing with it.
All
All
right,
right,
see you
respect
later.
everyone. Peace, peace.
Bye bye.